Hello, everyone. Welcome to PolkaWorld Interview. This is Kristen. In this episode, we are going to dive deep into two of the most popular projects in Moonbeam ecosystem, StellaSwap and Moonwell. First of all, let's start with a very brief introduction of you two guys about your project and yourself.
Hey everyone, my name is Aziz and I'm one of the co-founders of StellaSwap. So we're one of the leading DEXs on Moonbeam that basically offers an integrated way to DeFi and the Polkadot ecosystem. So we're actually a hybrid DEX by design with a standard AMM, a stable AMM, as well as an upcoming concentrated liquidity AMM, which is very, very soon to launch. And the reason behind that is we want to simply provide the most secure and optimal trading experience for users in DeFi, with really a strong focus on simplifying the DeFi user experience.
Okay, amazing. And Lucas.
Hi, everybody. Lucas here from Moonwell. I'm one of the co-founders, and Moonwell is a decentralized lending and borrowing protocol on top of Moonbeam and Moonriver, which for those who might not be aware, Moonbeam and Moonriver is the EVM layer for Polkadot and Kusama, which just means all the tools that you're used to using on Ethereum, whether it's different EVM wallets like MetaMask or Wallet Connect, you could use those both with StellaSwap and with Moonwell without having to learn new tooling and be able to lend out your tokens. It is decentralized, so everything is via smart contracts. And then you could borrow against your crypto depending on the parameters that are set on the market. So,
yeah, amazing. Let's start from our first topic. And Moonbeam Ignite is ongoing. And could you tell us that what is it and what have you achieved? Let's start from Lucas.
Yep. So Moonbeam Ignite is a liquidity incentive campaign. It's based on grants that both StellaSwap and Moonwell received from the Moonbeam Foundation in, I believe it was in October. And it's a campaign to essentially build base liquidity on the StellaSwap side. So you'll hear Aziz talking about base liquidity. And the reason base liquidity is really important on a DEX is in a decentralized lending and borrowing protocol, there's a certain amount of liquidity that's needed to be able to liquidate loans that are underwater. So as markets move up and down, individuals' loans could become insolvent, and community members are able to liquidate those loans for a small bonus. And if that liquidity is not available on the DEX, then the protocol does not function. It's one of the most important pieces of a lending and borrowing protocol. So Moonbeam Ignite is a campaign that's going to last about 24 to 26 weeks or so, where the glimmer that was received by the Moonwell community is being distributed to users of the protocol to encourage them to use the protocol and to just bootstrap that initial liquidity that's really important in a DeFi ecosystem.
Yeah, and anything you would like to add, Aziz?
Yeah, sure. I think it's also important to take note that the Moonbeam Ignite campaign was kickstarted by a fully robust governance process, whereby the proposals from two of the largest protocols, which is StellaSwap and Moonwell, got heavily discussed by the community, and then at the end of the day, it got passed, right? So a total of 12 million glimmer was allocated for Moonbeam Ignite between both StellaSwap and Moonwell. So the community basically voted on, discussed, and took charge of the entire thing, right? So on StellaSwap side, in terms of the traction, or in terms of the traction of the overall ecosystem, right? When Moonbeam Ignite started in October, a key metric, right, which is unique addresses on Moonbeam, shot up 4x, right, from around 250,000 to now around 1.3 million. So that's a very good achievement that showcase that there's an influx of new users, right? And on StellaSwap, obviously, the easiest way to track the sort of like the increase or the effectiveness of Moonbeam Ignite is through our TVL, right? So our TVL increased from 4 or 5 million to right now it's almost 30 million. So there's 30 million of baseline liquidity on StellaSwap right now.
Wow, yeah, it seems great. And so our next topic goes to StellaSwap. So could you tell us about what is the unique value proposition of StellaSwap?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. I think one of the unique value propositions of StellaSwap is the fact that we were a hybrid AMM. So basically, simply right, a hybrid AMM means you get the best of all worlds. What do I mean? So Uniswap has a different model of market making, right? And say the Curve has a different way. It's called a stable AMM, right? And Uniswap V3 is a different AMM. So across the board, there are various ways to for a DEX to function. Right? And on StellaSwap, in order for us to stand out and in order for us to provide the most optimal trading experience, we have a standard AMM, which is based on Uniswap V2. We have a stable AMM, which is based on Curve's AMM. And in the next week, we're going to launch a concentrated liquidity AMM, right? So all three AMM at one venue. So what this means for end users is that they could access the assets at the best prices with the lowest slippage at the end of the day. Because we have a combination of three AMMs. I think that's a very important thing, especially for a relatively new chain like Moonbeam, where TVL is relatively growing, right? And therefore, what we must ensure for this limited amount of TVL, we have to ensure tremendous capital efficiency, right? So that slippage is reduced, the cost of trading is conducive. So that's how we stand out.
There's a lot of innovations and learn from the Uniswap and the Curve, right? And
yes.
And so, what unique feature that Polkadot powers to StellaSwap?
One of the main thing about Polkadot is obviously the power of XCM, interoperability, right? Where different blockchains or called parachains can talk to communicate with each other and transfer assets to each other. So leveraging on XCM is certainly one of the main value propositions of Polkadot as a whole, and that's why projects like StellaSwap and Moonwell are attracted to Polkadot, right? Because the vision of interoperability is something that is very important in the blockchain world that doesn't compromise on security, doesn't compromise on speed. Right, basically the trilemma that we've always heard about. So XCM is something that is very important at the heart of Polkadot, and certainly at the heart of our vision in terms of how we see ourselves to be potentially the Schelling point of liquidity on Polkadot via XCM.
One of the things that the StellaSwap team and the Moonwell team discusses quite a bit is the different assets that are in the Polkadot ecosystem. So when you think about XCM and, for example, USDT Tether, which came native to Polkadot, the important thing there is from a risk and security standpoint, which I know we're going to be talking about here in a couple of minutes, it's not a bridged asset, so it's a native asset. And you could go from Akala to Astar to Moonbeam to Bifrost and all these L1s that are parachains on top of Polkadot without having to worry about bridge risk. And bridge risk is one of the biggest risks that any ecosystem kind of faces. So when you think about XCM, it's not only these native assets like USDT and Polkadot Foundation or the Web3 Foundation had announced that USDC is going to be coming soon as well, but as well as some of these other projects. So take Astar, for example, or Akala that are very well known. The assets could float between the parachains, so between Moonbeam and Akala and Astar, and they're all native assets. They're not bridged assets. They do need to be teleported, but it's a secure, it's a shared secure level. So I think that's another reason why we decided to build on Moonbeam as well, and as did StellaSwap. So
it just a question pop up in my mind because in Polkadot ecosystem, even though we have XCM, well, we can only leverage the asset within the Polkadot ecosystem, and in the Ethereum ecosystem, we can also leverage all the assets on the Ethereum ecosystem as well. So I think, especially for DeFi product, and the quality of asset is very important. So do you think that relying on Polkadot so much is kind of a limitation for your product?
I think that's no. I think what's important is interoperability across the board. Now, two kinds of interoperability, internal and external. So when I mean internal interoperability, is internal interoperability between the Polkadot ecosystem, which has a robust number of blockchains and projects building. For example, you have Akala, with their stablecoin USD. You have Interlay with basically a decentralized BTC, and you have a lot of other projects which are built for special use case specific application, right? And therefore, with XCM, all these assets across these parachains could flow into each other, right? So when we talk about Polkadot, leveraging on the native project assets is something that we want to harness to showcase, the power of true interoperability between blockchains. Now, when you talk about external interoperability, which is between Polkadot and Ethereum or Avalanche and Polygon, those kind of things, the main modus operandi is through centralized bridges, right? Or bridges in general, trust minimized bridges as well. And for us, we have voted in through Moonwell's governance, they put wormhole bridge as our main bridge on Moonbeam, right? And with bridge assets, right, that allows us to transfer assets to other L1s in so that we can use those blue chip. We are focused on blue chip assets, right? Like Ethereum, WPTC, which are bridged over from Ethereum, and say BUSD from BNB. So having bridging across other L1s is also a key important thing that facilitates capital inflows into Polkadot and Moonbeam ecosystem, right? And certain innovations that are coming up, for example, cross-chain swaps, with Squid and Axela, two projects that we are working with, right, would enable users to swap, assets in other blockchains, without even realizing that. So you really simplify the entire user experience, right? Imagine you're in Ethereum and you want Moonbeam's Glamour, right? You can just one-click swap, and then automatically on the back end, you're going to have Glamour sent to your Moonbeam address. So those are the kind of things or components that all of us are working towards and harnessing.
Yeah, very well said, Aziz. The one piece I want to add there, specifically when you think about Polkadot and Polkadot being a different language, being built on Substrate, that's where the advantage of Moonbeam and Moonriver come into place. Because if you have Ethereum on mainnet and you use a bridge like Wormhole and you're holding it, let's say in Wallet Connect or MetaMask or any of these wallets or on your ledger, when you come to Moonbeam, you still hold the asset in the same wallet. So your wallet doesn't change. Your interactions with the Polkadot ecosystem doesn't change, but you do have to use a bridge, right? So if you have Ethereum on mainnet, and let's say you're using MetaMask or Ledger, when you go to the bridge, you could swap on the bridge for Ethereum now on Moonbeam, and it acts the exact same way as it would on mainnet. So that's the big difference with Moonbeam, because it allows you to have access to the Polkadot ecosystem, but you don't have to worry about using Polkadot.js or a different wallet or anything like that. You could go between Ethereum mainnet, Avalanche, Polychain, and Moonbeam on top of Polkadot seamlessly.
Okay, as you mentioned, the bridge. So there can be no doubt that security is most important thing for DEX, especially after what transpired with Nomad exploit. So there can be no compromises when it comes to security. So how do your projects to ensure that all security issues are addressed?
That's a great question. So security is at the heart of StellaSwap, and in fact across the Moonbeam ecosystem as well, because Moonbeam Foundation takes a very rigorous view towards security. So the first thing that they will ask for any project coming is, do you have security audits, right? So I think it stems from the top in terms of having a proper security mechanisms and controls. In StellaSwap we have various controls that we have enforced: internal testing, third-party auditors, white hat, as in white hat analysis, as well as constant sort of like a security auditing and analysis, right? And we also have a bounty program on top of it, a bug bounty program, as well as Moonwell also has that. We have a bounty program of up to $250,000, and also for our latest AMM, concentrated liquidity AMM Pulsar, right? We actually worked with QuickSwap to have a joint audit on Code for Arena, which is one of the most popular auditing platform, right? So yeah, I think across the board we have various security controls in order to ensure that our protocols, our smart contracts are always functioning in a safe and secure way.
Okay, how about Lucas?
Yeah, so I could add to that. When I think about security, I think it's really important for everybody that's using DeFi to understand what the risks of using DeFi is. And the way I view it is kind of in two buckets. You have things that you could control and things that you can't control, right? So I'll talk about very quickly things when I say control, that the Moonwell community has different levers or different incentives in place to make the protocol as secure as possible. And then you have external factors like bridges, or other protocols that the Moonwell protocol interacts with, right? So for example, Moonwell as a protocol is dependent on Wormhole, because that's the main bridge that's being used, and it's dependent on the security of Stella as well. So it's extremely important that we hold each other as projects to the same standard. And then there's things that Moonwell, which Wormhole and both Stella also rely on Moonwell to be able to do. So I think it's really important to break those up. So as far as Moonwell, there's a number of things that the Moonwell community does. The first one is audits. So we talk about audits. Audits are the most important thing to make sure that the smart contract risk that you have on a protocol. So recently you've seen a lot of different exploits and hacks on, you have Mango markets, you have all these things going on. So smart contracts audits are the most important thing. And it's not just a one-time audit, having recurring audits, okay? Second thing is Immunify. We use Immunify, and it's a bug bounty program. And the reason bug bounty programs are really important is they create incentives for engineers to go and look at the code and try to find exploits and actually get rewarded for finding and reporting those exploits. A lot of projects that don't have bug bounty programs, what's the incentive for the person that finds a bug? It's to exploit the protocol instead of actually report it and get compensated or paid for recording the bug. So the Immunify piece is extremely important. The other thing that Moonwell community members might notice is there's another contributor to Moonwell called Gauntlet. Gauntlet is a firm that's extremely well known in the DeFi space. So Compound, Aave, all these big protocols use Gauntlet. And what Gauntlet does is they constantly look at StellaSwap, they look at Moonwell and how people are using the different protocols. And they'll recommend through governance, because Moonwell, the Well token, does have a utility where the Moonwell community members that hold the token could submit proposals and vote on them. So Gauntlet being one of those contributors, on a twice a month, they review all this and they propose changes to the protocol. So the changes could be something like collateral factor. Collateral factor on Moonwell is how much can you borrow against an asset. So if you have $1,000 of USDC, and the collateral factor is 60%, you could borrow up to 60% against your USDC. So depending on how the markets are reacting, Gauntlet could recommend, and they could lower it to 59 or 58 through governance. Okay, so I listed out smart contract audits. I listed out Immunify or bug bounty program. I've also included Gauntlet, which is constantly making sure that the protocols work in the right way. The other piece that's super important on Moonwell is Chainlink. So Moonwell only uses Chainlink price oracle feeds. And the reason for that is, again, over the last few months, we've seen exploits to oracles where you could manipulate the price of assets depending what the assets are. And by exploiting the oracle, you could actually take a lot more collateral out against the asset. So when you go and interact with Moonwell, you'll notice there's not a lot of assets. There's right now 6 assets that are supported on Moonwell. And one of the main reasons for that is assets that have smaller market cap are easier to influence and therefore have price oracle exploit possibilities. So the Moonwell community voted last month on a framework that was proposed by Gauntlet on what kind of assets the community should be comfortable to support on Moonwell, and the parameters around being able to support it. So I would say the majority of the time and the resources that the team that contributes to Moonwell spends is on security and making sure there's it's a secure and good environment to be able to lend and borrow. So I hope that's helpful to paint the whole picture, because there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes.
And the Moonwell community has rallied together to spark lively discussions on the governance forum. How does Moonwell activate new markets via governance voting?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Kristen. So there's 3 components of Moonwell governance. There's the forum, where all discussions are held. That's gov.moonwell.fi. And essentially on the forum, anybody could submit an idea. They could start a conversation if they're interested in a new token being supported. You'll see that even some other projects that want their token supported on Moonwell have forum discussions where they're introducing the project to the Moonwell community and really gathering support. So that's the first piece. There is an asset listing framework that Gauntlet, which I mentioned earlier, is a contributor to Moonwell, that they put up for a snapshot vote. So that's the second piece. Snapshot voting is essentially a way to, it doesn't do anything on chain. It just allows people to vote and take a temperature gauge and see if there's interest for a new market or a new idea or a new feature. So Gauntlet submitted a snapshot vote, I believe it was last month, and it was adopted by the Moonwell community. So I recommend anybody that's interested, or any ecosystem project that is interested in having their token supported on Moonwell, to go to the Gov forum, take a look at Gauntlet's asset listing framework to see all the components that are needed. They're kind of technical requirements. You can't just put up an asset up on-chain voting. So everything is laid out there. And then the third piece, so essentially once you have a forum discussion and the community supports you, and you have a snapshot vote to see if there's interest, there's a third component where you actually submit a vote for on-chain. So it has all the technical requirements that are needed. The team has spent a lot of time building out tooling to make it as easy as possible for somebody who's not technical to not have to know how to write smart contracts, to be able to submit it on chain. And essentially what happens is, if somebody submits an on-chain vote to add a new market, I believe right now BUSD is ready by the Moonwell community. It's just waiting on somebody to actually submit the on-chain vote with the parameters that Gauntlet has given as a recommendation. And then the way the on-chain vote works is it's actual smart contract code that is put into the vote. The vote lasts for 5 days. After 5 days, if it passes and reaches quorum, the code will execute automatically on-chain, listing the asset. So I know that's a lengthy response, but I would recommend all your listeners to go to gov.moonwell.fi. There is a lot of effort being put into localizing the content on Moonwell and announcements, especially for the Chinese community. There's a few other communities, the Russian community, the Spanish community. I believe there's a Turkish community as well now. But if there's any questions, you could always go into our Moonwell China Telegram channel, and there's moderators and community members there that are willing to help anybody.
The recent collapse of FTX caused a ripple effect in both traditional finance and the crypto market. How is it affecting the decentralized exchange or the DeFi ecosystem?
I think Polkadot weathered the FTX storm very well compared to other ecosystems. Now, that doesn't mean there wasn't impacts, but the impacts that Polkadot saw was from a liquidity standpoint and a de-risking scenario that has taken place over the past month and a half, whereas other ecosystems that were extremely closely tied to FTX, like Solana, has seen much more dramatic impacts. So the week that FTX went under, the Polkadot community is extremely close, and everybody was reaching out, making sure everybody was okay. All the projects were. And essentially what they were looking for is, what counterparty risks did you have? So do you have any exposure to FTX? As a project, projects have runway, right? They have capital to be able to build. And some projects, especially in the Solana ecosystem, a lot of them had their deposits at FTX. So they were significantly impacted, right? On top of that, depending how projects manage their treasuries, their online treasuries, they could also get impacted, right? So that's another impact. But I think that the biggest thing so luckily Polkadot didn't have a very close relationship with FTX. Polkadot does not have a relationship with any centralized exchange. And in this case, it was a very positive thing for the Polkadot ecosystem because it primarily went unimpacted. Now, on the liquidity side, what you saw is, and even now, a month later, nobody knows who they could trust. So everybody is walking on eggshells, and they're concerned around every single protocol and what kind of risk. So what you see in that kind of scenario is people deleverage. Deleverage means that if they were leveraged long or leveraged short on different kind of positions, they unwind those positions because they don't trust anybody. And the second thing that they do is they take funds into self-custody. into ledgers. They don't trust centralized exchanges. They don't trust DeFi protocols. Nobody trusts anybody. So you see a lot of liquidity flow out of every ecosystem. If you go to DeFi Llama, you'll see that across all of DeFi, liquidity has gone down. So that is an unfortunate event. I know a lot of people that were impacted personally. The good thing is Polkadot did weather it very well. There is liquidity that we've seen flow out of the Polkadot ecosystem. We've seen liquidity slowly coming back. So when Aziz mentioned StellaSwap TVL, it was right around 30 million a month ago, right before FTX. And you saw, again, across it, this isn't just StellaSwap, but you saw TVL kind of drop. I think it went down to like 20 million. And then it's taken 4 weeks to essentially come back where it was before FTX. So as the community gets more comfortable and they know who was exposed where, and they know that they could trust what Aziz was talking about, the amazing thing about DeFi is there's risk. Don't get me wrong, but the risk is different. It's not trusting, oh, I'm sending my money to Lucas. I hope Lucas is doing the right thing with money, with my money. It's all smart contract risk. And you could go and take a look at all the Moonwell smart contracts, and you could actually see that every single penny is deposited on chain. No individual could actually touch those funds because they're managed by the smart contract and not by individuals. So I think that's a high level summary of the FTX scenario. I think it's still going to take probably a couple months, but slowly we are seeing liquidity come back into the ecosystem.
The DEX and the centralized exchange, they deployed on the different infrastructures, and their underlying is totally different. So do you think that the DEX user experience will be as good as a centralized exchange in the future, or it's not going to happen?
I think it's already there, believe it or not. I think the intimidating thing with both DEXs and lending and borrowing protocols is there's a lot of components that are needed for it to work under the hood. But at the end of the day, what do you want to do on a DEX? I hold, Glimmer and I want to swap it for USDC. That trading experience is already there. It's just not front and center the way you see it on a centralized exchange. So the hard work and the heavy lifting is being done now to improve the trading experience. But you're going to see that adoption where DEXs are going to look like centralized exchanges, and you're going to be able to see your balances, and you're going to be able to swap between 2 assets without worrying how deep the farms are or how good all the other pieces are. It's already there. It's just I think a front end uplift that you're going to see all DEXs. I'd be curious to hear from Aziz though, because I'm sure his team's having these conversations internally.
For us, I guess I think the main thing about the user experience of a DEX is the throughput, basically the speed of processing, right? That has been one of the, unfortunately, the limitations of blockchain. You secure decentralization, but there's basically a trade-off of speed. If you look at centralized exchange order book systems, right, which is basically the most common form of systems, right, like NASDAQ, order book system underpins most basically the trading venues of the world, right? I mean, the throughput is nanoseconds, right? And that's why the infrastructure built around those trading venues, like market making, HFTs, high frequency tradings, that's all they do. And the amount of liquidity brought by all these players is due to the infrastructure, stuff like that, right? But unfortunately, right now, even decentralized, I mean, there is a good number of market making activities on DeFi, but it's incomparable as compared to a centralized venue, right? So, and the main kicker to set the base for the infrastructure would be throughput, right? And that's a problem that I think Polkadot is front and center of working on, and that's how it's so cool, right? As in you have XCM, and one of the main tenets of Polkadot is not as in compromising in security. And you can see there are various parachains they are building on Polkadot, which are going to be order book systems equivalent to that of their centralized counterparts, which is relatively quite fast, right? Very fast. So I think once we're slowly we are working towards the path of throughput, which can scale and can match that of the centralized exchange. And once that happens, I think it will be a very easy pivot for users that wants to trade, right? Because right now, okay, if the speeds are close to equal, one is decentralized and transparent and trustless, and the other, like FTX, right? So, that could be a good turning point for users then.
Good to hear. There's been a steady stream of Stella and Moonwell news and events recently. What are you mostly excited for in Moonbeam DeFi ecosystem? Let's start from Aziz.
Yeah, sure. I think Moonbeam Ignite, that started on October, was extremely successful with the help of participants across the Moonbeam ecosystem, Moonwell, Stella, the Foundation, and a lot of other protocols. Midas and upcoming protocols like DAM and Prime Protocol. The umbrella of Moonbeam Ignite's reach is increasing, right? And therefore, the amount of eyeballs, hype is increasing, right? On StellaSwap, we will continue building on that and basically doing our best to attract as much users outside, to facilitate capital inflows to us, right? Two main things that we are working on, which is going to be extremely exciting. Number one is one of the farms which are incentivized by the ecosystem, Glamour, is basically XLS USDC, right? Why is that important, right? Because it is going to unlock a new way for people to trade cross-chain, which is called cross-chain swaps, which I mentioned previously. If you're on Moonbeam and you want to get something from Ethereum, right? You don't have to bridge in, bridge out, buy, and then but you can just one click and then bam, cross-chain swaps in effect without needing to do anything, right? So that is something which is coming to Moonbeam, which is going to be deployed in the next few weeks as well, right? So we're really excited for that, and the entire ecosystem is going to benefit from that, from increased trading activity, increased liquidity flow towards Moonbeam. Really excited for that. The other thing is basically the upcoming launch of our concentrated liquidity AMM, which is called Pulsar, which is going to launch within the week or two. So why it's important is that's going to bring in the latest, the most efficient way to trade, right, with very low slippage. So we are really, we are going to launch with a beta, so that we can invite people to use and invite people to sort of like understand the entire process and how this is going to be extremely beneficial to the ecosystem in terms of providing a way to bootstrapping liquidity in a very sustainable and organic way, and at the same time having a user experience which is extremely conducive and robust, and that's what we're really, really excited on. Yeah.
How about Lucas?
Yep. On the Moonwell side, the focus the last few months of the Moonwell community has been to build out end-to-end governance. So I talked about governance a little bit earlier, but the pieces I didn't talk about are things like grants. So you're going to start seeing ecosystem projects actually start forum discussions and submit grant requests that the community could vote on that are going to be building on top of Moonwell. So the amazing thing about DeFi is the DEX from a liquidity standpoint is your foundation. Without it, other protocols can't live. But once DEX have sufficient liquidity and they're operating as well as Stella has, then you see money markets or lending and borrowing protocols pop up. And the reason that's really important is now when you're holding Glimmer, your Glimmer actually increases in value because you're lending it out and you're getting interest on your Glimmer. There's a lot of projects right now that are looking at Moonwell and are integrating Moonwell so that they use Moonwell. It's called the M token, similar to the C token on Compound, where you could, when you're holding Glimmer and you're using it, whether it's in for NFTs or on DEXs or other products, you're actually interacting with the Moonwell Glimmer that is being lent out and it's accruing in value. So I think that's, there's a couple of things there that I mentioned, the grants and projects that are building on top of Moonwell that could submit grants. Individual community members could also contribute to the Moonwell protocol and help maintain it and carve out grants, meaning payments for themselves for helping to maintain the Moonwell protocol. And over the next couple months, as you see more assets get listed, the majority of the conversations on the Moonwell forum is around new assets and the lending and borrowing collateral factors increasing so people could borrow more. You'll get to a certain point where there's so much liquidity on Moonwell that the tokens now are going to get integrated in other protocols. So you're not even going to know it. You might be using StellaSwap and you might be holding a Glimmer or Talisman wallet. And while you're holding that Glimmer in your wallet or interacting with a DEX or an NFT ecosystem, your Glimmer is actually accruing interest because it's being lent out, but it's liquid, so you could actually use it in multiple places.
Great.
So I think that's really the exciting piece with Moonwell.
Okay, and I think thank you very much for two of you guys to be here today, and we learned a lot, and may everything a great success.